Have you ever seen a warning sign so specific that you instantly knew someone wasn't joking? Most people would have turned around. They didn't. And by the time they realized what the sign actually meant, leaving wasn't an option anymore. The road to Tanner's Hollow stopped being a road about 4 miles in. It degraded from gravel to packed dirt scarred with roots, then into something that was really just a suggestion the forest hadn't reclaimed yet. Mara Vance drove it anyway, both hands tight on the wheel of her sister's borrowed SUV. In the back seat, Dev complained that his phone had lost signal an hour ago, while Priya slept against the window with her mouth open, completely undisturbed by the potholes. "There," Colton said from the passenger seat. He hadn't said much since they'd left the highway, which for Colton was its own kind of warning. He pointed toward a shape between the pines. Brown, low, half swallowed by shadow. "That's one." "One what?" Mara asked. "A cabin." He kept staring into the trees. "There's supposed to be 9 of them. The property listing said cabin singular, but the guy who owns the land," he glanced toward Priya. She found this. "The guy who owns the land built 9 cabins back in the 60s, some kind of retreat, maybe a church group, maybe a hunting club. Only one's rentable now. The rest are supposedly falling apart." "Supposedly," Dev repeated, sounding unconvinced. 7 minutes later, they found the rentable one. It was a modest 2-story A-frame with a wraparound porch. A chimney rose from one side, newer than the rest of the structure, patched together with mismatched brick like a scar that had healed wrong. A gravel apron out front held space for 2 cars. A woodpile sat beside the porch, stacked with the geometric precision of someone who had a lot of time and nothing else to do. Next to it stood a hand-painted sign nailed to a post. Cabin 4. No trespassing beyond this point at dark. "Charming," Priya said as she climbed out. "Real warm hospitality energy." "It's probably about the other cabins," Colton replied. "They're structurally unsafe. Liability thing." "Sure, liability," Priya said. They'd come for 5 days, mostly because of Mara. It was one last trip before everyone's lives scattered in different directions. Dev was starting a medical residency in September that would consume every waking hour. Priya's wedding was only 6 weeks away, and every weekend had already disappeared into cake tastings and seating charts. Colton had lost his father in March. He hadn't really talked about it, not to anyone. Mara had looked at the 4 of them drifting apart and thought, not yet, just a little longer. The cabin's owner, Ruth O'Coffer, managed the property remotely from a phone number with a Boise area code. She left the key in a lockbox and a laminated welcome sheet on the kitchen table. Mara read it aloud while everyone unpacked. "Welcome to Cabin 4 at Tanner's Hollow. Firewood is provided. Please use it sparingly as deliveries are infrequent. Well water is safe to drink but may taste of iron. The generator is in the shed for emergencies only. Please conserve fuel. The other cabins on the property are condemned and structurally unsafe. Please do not enter them under any circumstances. If you hear anyone outside at dark, do not go out to investigate. This is private hunting land and trespassers are not uncommon. Lock the doors at dusk. Enjoy your stay." Priya set a cooler on the floor with a thump. "Enjoy your stay. Interesting choice after the paragraph about strangers outside." "It's a hunting property," Colton said. "People probably wander through. It's just liability language." "You keep saying that like it's some magic phrase that makes things less creepy. Because most of the time, it is." For the first time since leaving the city, something close to Colton's old sense of humor slipped through. Dry, subtle, crooked. Mara felt the knot in her chest loosen just a little. Maybe this trip would help. That evening unfolded exactly the way cabin trips are supposed to. A fire crackled inside the wood stove. Dev secretly opened a bottle of wine he'd hidden inside one of her boots. Dev stood at the kitchen window trying to identify constellations, but the stars were so dense out here that every familiar shape dissolved into thousands of unfamiliar ones. Nobody mentioned the warning sign again. Nobody talked about the other 8 cabins hidden somewhere beyond the trees. But later that night, while holding a mug of tea, Mara found herself standing at the window. She stared toward the tree line. Beyond it, the darkness looked deeper somehow. She wondered how close the other cabins really were. She couldn't see a single one. She told herself it was only because of the trees.
The first warning didn't come with footsteps. It didn't come with screams. It came with counting. And because it seemed so small, nobody treated it like a danger. The first strange thing happened on the second night. It was so small that none of them thought much about it. Not until much later, when they realized the smallest things had been the warnings. Dev woke around 2 in the morning. The next day, over breakfast, he poked at his eggs with the frustration of someone who hadn't slept well. "I woke up because I heard someone counting." Priya looked up. "Counting?" "Yeah. Not talking, counting. A man's voice. Outside the cabin. It was slow, really slow." Mara frowned. "Counting what?" "I don't know. It wasn't like someone reciting numbers. It sounded more like—" he searched for the right words. "Like he was pointing at things. I got up. I looked out the upstairs window. There was nobody there. Just the yard, the woodpile, and the trees. That's it." Priya tilted her head. "So 1, 2, 3? I guess." "An owl said 4?" she asked with a grin. Dev rolled his eyes. "I never said it actually said 4. You literally said it sounded like counting. I'm saying I probably dreamed it, or heard an owl. Owls make weird noises. Drop it." Mara dropped the conversation, at least publicly. Privately, she stored it away. Ever since she was a child, she'd kept a mental drawer labeled "things that don't add up yet," an extra place setting, a shadow that fell wrong, a photograph where someone's smile never reached their eyes. Her therapist once called it hypervigilance. Mara privately believed it had kept her alive more than once. She trusted that drawer. That afternoon, they decided to hike. According to Ruth's welcome sheet, there was a creek only 20 minutes along a well-marked trail. It wasn't. Nearly an hour later, Colton finally stopped walking. He pulled out an actual compass. "I don't think we're going the right way." "You brought a compass?" Dev asked. "I don't trust my phone." He turned them around. On the way back, they passed through a stretch of pine trees so perfectly spaced that they almost looked planted. Then Priya froze. "Guys!" Everyone stopped. About 60 yards away sat another cabin, not theirs, smaller, single story. One corner of the roof had collapsed inward, like a mouth missing teeth. Every window was empty, no glass, just black openings. The entire building leaned slightly to one side, slowly sinking into the earth. Cabin 2. Dev squinted. Or maybe 8. The number's too weathered. "We should go look," Priya said. She was already walking toward it. "The sign said not to," Mara replied. "The sign said don't go after dark. It's 2 in the afternoon. It also said they're structurally unsafe. I'm not planning to dance on the floor. I just want to look through a window." In the end, 3 of them went. Mara stayed where she was. Something inside her refused to get any closer. She couldn't explain why. She watched Priya and Dev lean into one of the broken windows. Colton slowly circled toward the porch. He tested each board before putting his weight on it. "There's furniture in here," Priya called. "A table, chairs. It's not empty. It's just old." "Anything on the walls?" Mara asked. She wasn't sure why she'd asked. Priya waited a moment before answering. "I think photos. I can't really tell. Too much water damage." By then, Colton had reached the front door. He placed one hand on it. From 60 feet away, Mara saw everything. Then something strange happened. He pulled his hand away. He didn't open the door. He just stood there, completely still, his head tilted slightly, like someone listening. Colton? He turned. His expression had changed. Nothing. Let's head back. It's getting late. Mara looked up. It wasn't getting late. It was barely 2:30. Nobody pointed that out. They simply walked back toward cabin 4. Nobody spoke much on the return trip. Later that evening, Dev casually mentioned something that made Mara's stomach tighten. "I think we passed 3 cabins today." "What?" "The broken one, and 2 more way farther through the trees. I didn't say anything because, I don't know, it felt weird." Nobody answered, because all 4 of them realized they remembered seeing them too. They just never said it out loud.
Sometimes the scariest thing isn't seeing something, it's hearing something that shouldn't be there. Because once you hear it, you can never convince yourself it wasn't real. Colton didn't sleep that night. Unlike Dev, he never mentioned it. Mara only found out because she woke around 3 in the morning for a glass of water. When she walked downstairs, she saw him sitting alone at the kitchen table. No lights, no phone, no book, just staring at the front door. "Hey," she whispered. He didn't jump. He slowly turned toward her, almost as if he'd already known she was there. "Hey, you okay?" For several seconds he didn't answer. Then he finally spoke. "When I touched that cabin door today," he looked back toward the darkness outside, "I heard something." Mara sat across from him. The glass of water was forgotten. What kind of something? He rubbed both hands over his face. A voice. Not words, just a voice. It was right on the other side of the wood. It's so close, it felt like someone had their mouth pressed against the wood. He swallowed. It was listening to me, the same way I was listening for it. The room fell silent. "You don't think it was an animal?" Mara asked. "I don't know what I think. I haven't been sleeping. Maybe my brain's making things up, but—" He stopped. He didn't sound like he believed that. Colton had never been good at lying, especially not to people he cared about. It was one of the reasons Mara loved him, not romantically, just quietly, carefully, like something fragile. "We could leave," she said. "Tomorrow morning. No one would blame us." Colton let out a tired laugh. For what? A weird sound? A bad night's sleep? How would we explain that to Dev and Priya? We'd sound ridiculous. He looked down at his hands. "It's just a cabin. Cabins make noises. They settle. The wind moves through them. It's the 4th night. We'll go home soon." His voice softened. "I'll go back to the job I hate, my apartment, the one that still smells like my dad's aftershave. I still haven't thrown out his coat." His voice cracked, just once, on the word coat. Without saying anything, Mara reached across the table. She took his hand. This time, he didn't pull away. "Okay," she said quietly, "we stay. But if anything else happens," she emphasized the words, "something real, we leave. No debate, no waiting. Deal?" Colton nodded. Deal. Neither of them knew they would need that promise before another 24 hours had passed. The next morning felt almost normal. Almost. Priya made pancakes on the ancient gas stove. She'd proudly announced she'd managed to not burn a single one. Dev seemed to have convinced himself that daylight erased everything strange after midnight. "So," he smiled, "want to try finding that creek again? I downloaded an offline map before we lost signal." Mara laughed. "Now you tell us?" While everyone packed their bags, she went looking for extra towels. Instead, she found something else. a spiral notebook. It was hidden on the top shelf of a hallway closet behind a stack of old quilts. The cover had faded to a dull gray. Written across a front in careful fountain pen were 2 words, Cabin 4. For a moment she almost put it back, then curiosity won. She opened it. The pages weren't filled with vacation memories or guest reviews. The first entry she read was dated June 1971. Fed the perimeter Tuesday and Thursday per instructions. Nothing came to 4 this stay. Heard activity from 2. Did not investigate. Another entry, August 1978. New family in 6 did not follow the count. Advise future renters strongly on the count. We lost the youngest. Mara's heartbeat slowed. Another page, October 1985. Quiet season. The count held. No incidents at 4. She turned another page. This one was dated March 1994, and everything changed. Do not, under any circumstance, answer if it counts to your number. Whoever wrote the laminated rules left this part out. It's going to get someone killed. If you are counted, do not answer. Do not open the door. It only wants an answer. It cannot come inside on its own. Mara stopped reading. Her hands had gone cold. She read the page again, then a third time. One sentence echoed in her mind. It only wants an answer. Suddenly, Dev's story from breakfast 2 days earlier came rushing back. Someone was counting, not talking, not shouting, counting, slowly, like they were pointing at things. Mara closed the notebook. Then she carried it downstairs. She had a feeling this vacation was over.
Some warnings are meant to scare you. This one wasn't. It was written by someone who expected the next person to need it. The 4 of them gathered around the kitchen table. The pancakes had gone cold. Mara opened the notebook again. Listen to this. She read the next entry aloud. We are not the only cabin that gets visitors. The count moves between all 9 cabins. Sometimes it takes years, sometimes decades. Cabins 2, 6, and 9 are gone. Not because they're unsafe, because they lost someone. Whatever comes to these cabins keeps returning to the same doors, the way a dog returns to its food bowl. The room was silent. Mara turned the page. If this is your first stay in cabin 4, you will hear it before you ever see it. It counts slowly, without emotion, without hurry. If the number matches the people in your group, or someone's age, or a room number, or anything close enough to identify one of you, do not answer. Do not open the door. Do not even go to the window. It is patient in a way nothing alive should be. Eventually, it will leave cabin 4 and move to another cabin. Ride it out. That's all anyone has ever been able to do. Ride it out and don't answer. Nobody spoke. The silence felt heavier than the 4. Then Mara noticed something. Several pages had been ripped out. Only jagged edges remained near the spine. The next entry was written in completely different handwriting. The ink looked newer, only 3 years old. She kept reading. I don't know what happened to the missing pages. They were already gone when I started managing bookings for Ruth. I'm leaving this note because someone needs to know. 4 groups ago, a family of 4 rented cabin 4. Only 3 came home. The official report says the father heard something outside, went to investigate, got lost in the woods, died from exposure. I don't believe that. I think someone counted to a number that matched him, and he answered. Nobody moved. Nobody even breathed. Finally, Jesus Christ, Priya whispered. This has to be fake, Dev said quickly. It has to be. This has to be one huge prank. Maybe it's one of those horror experiences, like an ARG. Maybe we accidentally rented one. The listing never mentioned anything like this, Mara replied. It just said, rustic getaway, close to nature, dog-friendly. We don't even have a dog, Priya muttered. The joke landed with no one. Colton hadn't said a word. He stared at the notebook. His face had gone pale. Finally, he looked up. We leave. Today. Right now. Nobody argued. For the first time since arriving at Tanner's Hollow, every single one of them agreed on something. They packed quickly. Clothes disappeared into bags without being folded. Food was thrown into coolers. Nobody cared about making a mess anymore. They just wanted to leave. Whatever this place really was, none of them wanted to be there after sunset. They had no idea. The forest had already decided otherwise. The decision to leave came too late. Whatever was waiting in Tanner's Hollow wasn't finished with them yet. They packed quickly. Nobody folded clothes. Nobody worried about leaving anything behind. The only thing that mattered was getting out before nightfall. At around 1 in the afternoon, Dev carried the last bag outside. A few seconds later, he walked back in. His face had gone completely pale. The car won't start. Everyone froze. What do you mean it won't start? Priya asked. I mean, I turned the key, it clicked, and nothing happened. Maybe the battery's dead? I don't know, I'm not a mechanic, but it's not starting. All 4 of them walked outside, as if standing around the SUV together might somehow fix it. Colton popped the hood. He checked the battery, the cables, anything he could recognize. After a few minutes, he slowly closed the hood. I've got nothing. Dev pulled out his phone. Still nothing. No signal. He looked at the others. We can't even call for help. How far's the nearest town? Priya asked. Mara thought for a moment. The paved road started about 4 miles back, but we drove another 20 minutes before we reached anything, so we walk, Colton said. It beats staying here. Nobody liked the idea, but nobody wanted another night in cabin 4. They packed 2 backpacks, water, granola bars, a flashlight, anything light enough to carry. At exactly 1:40 in the afternoon, they started walking. The dirt road stretched ahead through endless trees. At first, everything looked familiar. The same bends, the same ruts, the same towering pines. But after a while, something changed. The roads seemed to split more often than anyone remembered. There were side paths, old tire tracks, narrow trails disappearing into the woods. None of them remembered seeing so many on the drive in. By 4 o'clock, Dev finally stopped walking. I don't think this is the right road. It has to be, Priya replied. There's only one road. No, there were turnoffs, remember? They probably led to the other cabins. We could have taken one without realizing. Nobody spoke. Colton pulled out his compass. He studied it for a few seconds. We're still heading west, toward the highway, so the direction's right. We just need to keep going. It sounded reasonable, so they kept walking. The sun slowly dropped lower. The shadows grew longer. Then, the trees suddenly opened into a clearing. Right in the middle stood another cabin, older than the others, smaller. Its windows were boarded shut from the inside. A crooked metal number hung above the door. 9. Priya stared at it. We are way off the trail. It's getting dark, Mara said. We need to decide. Do we keep walking through unfamiliar woods or find shelter? You seriously want to stay in that? Dev asked.
His eyes never left cabin 9. The notebook literally said the other cabins lost people. That doesn't sound like shelter. It sounds like the opposite. Mara looked toward the setting sun. We won't make it out before dark. If we keep walking, we could end up completely lost. Nobody had a better idea. They stood there, arguing with themselves more than each other. Finally, they decided not to risk cabin 9. Something about the boarded windows felt wrong. They walked another 15 minutes. Then they found something else. A tiny hunting cabin, barely larger than a shed. 1 room, 4 bunk beds, an old wood stove. Most importantly, a door that's still locked from the inside. There wasn't any number outside. Mara took that as a good sign, even though she had no reason to. They dragged one of the loose bunk frames across the doorway. It made a crude barricade. Nobody lit the stove. Nobody wanted smoke rising through the trees. The forest grew strangely quiet. By Dev's phone, it was 7:19 p.m. Then, at exactly 9:14, someone outside started counting.
At exactly 9:14, it began. Not with footsteps, not with scratching, not with a knock. Just a voice. Counting. It started exactly the way Dev had described 2 nights earlier. A man's voice. Low. Calm. Patient. It came from somewhere outside the cabin. Close enough for all 4 of them to hear it clearly, but strange enough that none of them could tell exactly where it was. The sound seemed to drift through the trees, sometimes closer, sometimes farther away, almost as if distance meant nothing to it. Then the voice spoke. 1. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. 2. Priya reached for Mara's hand in the darkness. Her grip was so tight it hurt. 3. Dev leaned forward. His voice was barely a whisper. It's not going to reach us. We're 4 of us. Whatever number it's looking for, it isn't ours. Then the voice spoke again. 4. Silence. A long, unnatural silence. Longer than the pauses between any of the other numbers. It sounded like it was waiting for someone to answer. Mara suddenly remembered the notebook. If it counts to your number, do not answer. Her heart pounded. 4 could mean anything. 4 people. Cabin 4. The 4th day. It didn't need to be exact. It only needed someone to think it was calling for them. Nobody answered. The counting continued. 5. The voice moved. Not loudly, not quickly, but Mara could feel it changing position, as if something was slowly walking around the cabin. The air outside shifted. The trees rustled. Then, 6. Beside her, Colton's breathing became uneven, short, shaky breaths. Mara knew what he was thinking. 6 months. It had been 6 months since his father died. She reached over and squeezed his hand, hard, without saying a word. The message was simple. Don't answer. The voice continued. 7. The pauses between each number grew longer, almost as if it enjoyed making them wait, almost as if anticipation was part of the hunt. Then, 8. Dev made a tiny sound in his throat. He covered his mouth immediately. Nobody looked at him. Nobody spoke. The silence after 8 stretched on and on, so long that Mara almost believed it had gone. Maybe they'd survived. Maybe it had moved on. Maybe the notebook had been right. Then, right outside the cabin, so close the walls seemed to vibrate, The voice whispered, 9. Before anyone could react, Priya answered. She didn't mean to. It wasn't a decision, it was pure instinct, a frightened reflex. A tiny word escaped her lips. What? The cabin fell completely silent. No wind, no insects, nothing. Then, something outside laughed. It wasn't human. It sounded like something trying to imitate laughter without understanding what laughter actually was. Every hair on Mara's body stood up. Then, the cabin door latch slowly began to turn by itself. The barricade creaked, wood groaned. Something on the other side was trying the door, patiently, without force, without panic, like it already knew. Sooner or later, someone would let it in. The door never opened, but somehow that was even worse. Everything after that blurred together in Mara's memory, not as a sequence of events, as flashes. The bunk frame shook as something outside pressed against the door. It wasn't trying to smash its way in. It was testing it, patiently, almost curiously. Dev finally turned on his phone's flashlight. The beam bounced wildly around the room because his hands wouldn't stop shaking. "The window," Colton whispered. "Get away from the door." The problem was, there wasn't anywhere to go. The cabin was a single room. Every wall felt too close. Priya stood frozen. Her face had gone completely white. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I'm so sorry." She kept repeating it over and over until her voice sounded small, almost childlike, like she'd already convinced herself everyone was about to die because of one word. The pressure against the door continued. The latch kept turning, but the door never opened. That was the part Mara couldn't stop thinking about. The notebook had said, it cannot come in on its own. It only wants an answer. Priya had answered, but she hadn't opened the door. She hadn't invited it inside. Maybe that mattered. Maybe there was another rule, one nobody had written down. The thing outside had permission to come closer, but not permission to enter. The pressure continued for what felt like forever. Later, Dev checked his phone. It had lasted just under 11 minutes. Then, without warning, it stopped. Not gradually, not like footsteps fading away. 1 second something was outside the door. The next, it was gone. The ordinary sounds of the forest returned. Wind moved through the trees. Some small animal rustled in the brush. It was as if nothing had ever been there. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Minutes passed. Finally, Colton broke the silence. "Is it gone?" "I don't know," Mara answered honestly. The notebook had explained how to survive the counting. It hadn't explained what happened after someone answered. None of them slept. They stayed against the far wall until morning. When the first gray light slipped through the cracks around the boarded window, it felt like the first real breath any of them had taken all night. "We leave," Dev said immediately. "Right now. No stopping, no arguments." Mara nodded. Then she looked at Priya. "Are you okay?" Priya slowly looked up. Her eyes were red. Her face looked older somehow, like she'd aged overnight. When she finally spoke, her voice barely rose above a whisper. "I can still hear it." The others stared at her. "What do you mean?" Mara asked softly. "The counting, it's not outside anymore." She touched the side of her head. "It's in here. It never stopped." A cold silence filled the room.
This wasn't in the notebook. No one had written about hearing it afterwards. No one had written about what came next. And for the first time, Mara realized surviving the night didn't necessarily mean they had escaped.
Morning finally came, but escaping the cabin didn't mean escaping what had followed them. At first light, they left. Nobody spoke. Nobody looked back. They walked until the trees finally began to thin. By mid-morning, they found the road. Not because they had figured anything out, just luck, pure luck. When Mara spotted the gray strip of asphalt through the pines, she almost cried. It still took another hour and a half to reach it. They were exhausted, hungry, running on almost no sleep. The moment Dev stepped onto the pavement, he let out a shaky laugh. Oh, thank God. He kept repeating it. Oh, thank God. Colton rested a hand on his shoulder. Breathe. About 20 minutes later, a logging truck came down the road. The driver was a heavy-set man named Wade. He didn't ask many questions. None of them volunteered any answers. Wade drove them 11 miles to the nearest town, a tiny place called Cutter's Fork. It had a diner, a gas station, and a sheriff's substation. The deputy listened patiently as Mara explained what had happened, or at least the version they were willing to tell. The SUV wouldn't start. They got lost on the trails. They spent the night in an old hunting cabin. No mention of counting. No mention of the notebook. No mention of the voice outside the door. Before leaving Cabin 4, Mara had slipped the notebook into her backpack. She couldn't explain why. She just knew she couldn't leave it behind for the next renters. The deputy arranged for a tow truck. When the driver reached the SUV, he climbed inside, turned the key. The engine started immediately. No dead battery, no mechanical problem, nothing. Mara felt her stomach twist. Nobody said a word. That evening, they checked into the only motel in town. For the first time in days, they were behind an ordinary locked door, facing an ordinary parking lot with ordinary streetlights. It should have felt safe. Priya slept for 12 straight hours. The next morning, she looked almost like herself again. She even joked that she'd never go camping again. She finished an enormous plate of pancakes. She smiled. She laughed. On the surface, everything seemed normal. But Mara noticed something. Whenever Priya was distracted, she counted. Highway exits, items on restaurant menus, floor tiles, anything in front of her. Then she would suddenly stop, as if she'd reached a number she didn't want to hear, as if something inside her was still listening. Mara couldn't let it go. Everyone else wanted to move on. She needed answers. 3 weeks after they returned home, Mara drove 2 hours to meet a retired research librarian named Celine Iwu. She specialized in the history of abandoned communities, old churches, failed communes, forgotten retreats. Mara brought photographs of the notebook. She didn't tell Celine everything, only enough to ask questions. Celine studied the pages for minutes. Then she looked up. Tanner's Hollow. I know this place. There isn't much written about it. Most of what I know comes from old newspaper clippings and interviews. She paused. The retreat was built in 1961 by a preacher named Elias Tanner. He believed something already lived on that land, something much older than the people who settled there. Mara leaned forward. What was it? Celine slowly shook her head. Nobody knows, but Tanner believed it didn't feed on flesh, it fed on attention. She tapped one of the notebook pages. She believed all it wanted was an answer. Mara felt a chill run through her. So he built the cabins for it? Celine nodded slowly. That's my theory. 9 cabins, 9 places where people could hear it,
where eventually someone might answer. She continued, "The community fell apart within about 15 years. There were disappearances, accidents, deaths. The local newspapers stopped reporting them after a while. Elias Tanner disappeared in 1976. They never found his body. The land was eventually sold. Most of the cabins were abandoned. One remained open, probably because whoever owned the property didn't believe the stories. Or she looked down at the notebook again. Or they believed them just enough to write a warning instead." Mara was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked the question that had been haunting her. "Do you believe it's real?" Celine smiled faintly. "I believe something happened on that land, for decades, to too many people. People who had no reason to invent the same story." She folded her hands. "I don't need to know exactly what it is. I only need to know it's real enough to kill." Neither of them spoke after that. Mara thanked her. She gathered the notebook photographs. Then she drove home. She had gone looking for answers. Instead, she left with something much worse: confirmation.
Most horror stories end when the survivors escape. This one didn't. Because some things don't stay where you leave them. 8 months had passed since Tanner's Hollow. The four of them rarely talked about what happened there. When they did, it was only with each other, in quiet voices, as if speaking too loudly might somehow bring it back. Dev finished his first hospital rotation without incident. From the outside, he seemed fine, but he still slept with a white noise machine every night. Before the trip, he couldn't sleep with any background noise. Now, he couldn't sleep without it. Silence made his skin crawl. Colton slowly began talking about his father again, really talking instead of avoiding the subject. Mara sometimes wondered if surviving that night had changed him. For one terrifying moment, his grief had almost answered the voice outside. Now he carried it differently. Not because the pain was gone, but because he finally allowed himself to face it. Priya got married in the spring, and Mara stood beside her during the ceremony. To everyone else, Priya looked perfectly happy, perfectly normal. But Mara noticed something no one else did. Every now and then, Priya would suddenly stop talking, just for a second. Her eyes would lose focus before she quietly shook it off and continued the conversation. Whenever it happened, Mara reached over and gently squeezed her hand. She never had to explain why. Priya always understood. As for Mara, she kept the notebook locked away in a drawer she rarely opened. Since meeting Celine, she'd spent months researching Tanner's Hollow, Elias Tanner, the 9 cabins, and every disappearance connected to the property. She found rumors, old newspaper clippings, fragments of forgotten stories. But she never found a single account of anyone destroying whatever lived there. No ritual, no ending, no victory. Only the same pattern. Years would pass. A cabin would sit empty. Eventually, someone would rent it again. And somewhere in the woods, the counting would begin. More than once, Mara thought about calling the property owner to warn the next guests. She even found the number. Her finger hovered over the call button before she finally lowered the phone. Who would even say, "If you hear someone counting outside your cabin, don't answer"? Who would believe her? She never made the call. Some nights, when her apartment was completely quiet, she lay awake listening to the ordinary sounds of the city. A car passing outside, footsteps in the hallway, water moving through old pipes. Without realizing it, she caught herself counting them. 1, 2, 3. Then she forced herself to stop. She reminded herself it was somewhere else, another place. It wasn't counting her. Not anymore. Not here. Most nights she believed it. Almost. And somewhere deep inside a forgotten stretch of pine forest, where the maps no longer bothered with names, something waited. Patient. Unhurried. Still counting. Still searching. For the one who answers.